here today to explore the dynamic relationship between CEOs and top HR leaders, specifically the remarkable impact that synergy can potentially have organization-wide. So when we talk about taking a company to greater heights, these are the pivotal figures in shaping the strategic direction. So how do top decision makers translate their goals into reality by finding and nurturing the right people to execute their collective vision? These are just a few of the questions that we'll be exploring today. Before we properly begin our conversation, I'd like to request that our audience participants keep your audio switched off, because there will be time for Q&A at the end of our conversation. You may also like to type in your questions in the chat box at any point that our conversation inspires you to do so. Please also note, as you would have heard, that our session is being recorded and live streamed. Now let's get started. So first, I thought we could kick it off by asking, okay, Kenny, are there any particular qualities that would help a CEO to more effectively partner with their HR leader?
Yeah, I think in terms of partnership, there is no specific between like CEO and HR. I think it's going to be any qualities that will work in today's environment, and especially from a culture standpoint. So if you look at it, I think it has to be the ability, I think, for both sides to have the vision of what they want for the company. And that needs to be articulated from both sides. So the ability to communicate their vision as a CEO and as the CHRO will be important. That's number one. Number two, of course, the other core skills will be empathy, the ability to understand each other, the ability to be patient with one another. I think those are the things that will need to be across. Like I say, it's not specific to just the CEO and HR. I think it's across any leadership team that is looking at that level. Those are the qualities that I think, but in this day and age, I think the ability to manage stress, the ability to manage yourself is going to be very, very crucial. Very different from 20, 30 years ago, where you have those hard-charging CEOs who wants to get everything done and kill a lot of people along the way. I think that's not the way that we do things today. So, and that has got to change. And that, I think, if you ask me, a lot of the change, I think, has to happen more on the CEO side rather than on the HR side. So I think CEOs, the way that we develop new CEOs today, a very different group of people that needs to be in leadership positions. And the older group of CEOs, I'm talking about myself and the generation that are currently, who grew up, like I said, on the harder side of things, needs to learn how to change the way we think, change the way we communicate. So, and a lot of the so-called weaknesses or gaps actually happen on the CEO side, not on HR. So that's my point of view.
Thanks for that. And I like what you said about empathy as well. So Robert, same question goes to you. What qualities do you think an HR leader, it would be good for an HR leader to have when having chemistry, when trying to find chemistry with their CEO?
Firstly, thank you for having me here. And I'm personally delighted to be, partnering with Kenny, who I know is a great speaker. So I'll do all my best to match his wisdom. And I know there are other colleagues also here, so feel free to chime in. I think the response to your question lies in the question. You've used the word chemistry, and you've not used any other branch of science like physics, modern arts, and so on and so forth. So when chemistry works, right, a lot of magic happens, and the right chemistry works, a lot of magic happens. You get air, you get water. But again, if chemistry still works, electricity, nuclear bombs, all of that happens. So a lot of impact gets created. So the right word here is the right chemistry. And when you have the right chemistry, I think you're looking at impact on people's livelihood. You're looking at impact on sustainability, long-term sustainability of businesses, but you're also looking at the impact on the communities to which those businesses serve. So hence, getting the chemistry right is pretty important when it comes to individuals, when it comes to organizations, because this is a team sport. It is not an individual sport. Kenny was very vocal when he talked about the more needs to happen on the CEO side and less on HR. I think it's a partnership, right? And when you pull the strings on both sides, it just tightens the collaboration much better. To the qualities that you talked about, I think for me the number one is ambition. You need to set that pace pretty clear. So having ambition, the drive, the purpose, a very clear vision, and both from a CEO and CHRO put together. Uh, if there is a lack of ambition, you're not able to display that down the line. So a CEO with a very strong ambition, with a very audacious ambition, makes a lot of sense. Google talks about roof shot, moon shots, but that's very clearly articulation of purpose and how you link that purpose to what you do, how you do, and then you build a very compelling employee proposition based on that. The second most important thing in my understanding is about mutual respect, because it's a dialogue, right? It's a dialogue between a CHRO and CHRO, and if there is less mutual respect, you don't have that candor in that conversation. You don't challenge, and if you don't have the right challenge, the right conversation, you don't evolve, and both of them have to evolve together in this relationship as you move forward. And Kim Scott, the famous author, very rightly talks about radical candor. So the third thing for me is about transparency and courage. So you display that courage, you display that transparency, because that's how you get a lot to the conversation without being threatened by the impact. But you look at the larger benefit that brings to the organization and to the community as a whole.
That's very well put, and good catch on my word, chemistry. It's true. It's that's why we have a dialogue, right? And I think it's very, very telling of the kind of partnership that is supposed to take place. That's the most powerful when there's the right kind of chemical reaction. But some chemical reactions also can go quite badly. So my next question is, are there any qualities that might serve as an obstacle that would get in the way of this synergy?
Kenny, you want me to go take a stab?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay, no problem. So I think, look, Dr. Thomas Harris talked about I'm okay, you're okay, and it's a very well titled book, long time back, which talks about transaction analysis in simple, and that quality is basically people in position feel themselves superior in some way or the other. I think when that steps in, you fail to listen. Once you stop listening, you fail to improve. So clearly, any sign of growth is all about the ability to listen, the ability to have that candor and conversation. The most important thing in any relationship is also psychological safety, and not building the psychological safety net, not between the CHRO and CEO, but it's also the management team put together. As I said, it's a team sport. You evolve, you come together, but not creating that environment where people don't talk openly, transparently, and challenge each other's ideas. That's not going to happen, because a great idea can only multiply when you plant it in many people's minds. If you keep it in your own minds, it's not going to grow. It's just going to remain at that very level. So if you have to amplify ideas, if you have to amplify knowledge, it just comes from creating that net of psychological safety as much as possible. So I think two things differentiate you today, right? You can only get differentiated by a great technology or by a great service. And clearly, all those are people led. So clearly, the more partnership you drive and you help creating that bonds works pretty much well.
Thanks for that, Robert. And I enjoyed the quotations as well. How about Kenny?
Okay, so we already mentioned about the quality side of stuff that, I mean, people quality that actually is an obstacle. So I'll just mention, I think in addition to that, what I feel are obstacles now between, usually when I can see the both sides, it's more, I mean, to do with the technical side of stuff, right? So what I mean is that a lot of times the CEOs don't really understand what the HR function is. And a lot of the times, and I find that a lot of HR people don't really know the business side of things. So I think these two cause a lot of issues that when I see people discussing. So from a HR standpoint, the ability to read profit and loss statements. Do you know what is a balance sheet? Do you know what is a profit margin of the company? Do you know what is a capex and a opex? Those kind of things, when I talk to a lot of younger HR professionals, they don't even know what that is. They don't even know how their business operates. So, and when you try to, steamroll HR processes that doesn't match what your company is doing in terms of your business and your business model, you're going to have a problem because you're trying to copy and paste theories that you learn and try to apply in your company, and it doesn't really work across. Even if you're in the same industry, your business model may not be the same. So those are some of the things. I think fundamentally, a lot of the technical stuff in terms of the business side of stuff, HR should be more into, or at least spend more time to learn those kind of things and not just HR, right? Similarly, on the other side, I find that a lot of CEOs delegate too much of quote unquote HR stuff to HR. And they are so blind to what HR is. They don't know, or they don't appreciate, what CEOs don't appreciate is like, how does a performance management system work in the first place, right? What is a talent management process looks like? What is a succession plan? You know, all those kind of things which, and most CEOs don't even know what tools are to be used when. They can't even differentiate, like, when do I use bonus and when do I use increments? When do I use those kind of stuff, right? Because, and they treat everything the same, and they just, you know, so, and they think that HR is such a simple process. You know, if I hire right, I fire the right people, I get HR correct. So I think a lot of CEOs don't understand enough of HR, and it's a critical, to me, technical knowledge that CEOs have to learn, regardless of which path you come from, whether you're from finance or you're from engineering or you're from the business side. They should spend a lot of time learning about HR, or at the minimum, social psychology, and, you know, things that they need to learn of what are things that make people click. Again, those are, I find a lot of CEOs, when they're trying to develop the new leaders, don't spend enough time on to look at it. So on top of all the personal attributes which Robert mentioned, I find that the obstacle is the technical side of stuff.
Thanks for that, Kenny. Actually, it got me thinking of another question, which I'll ask later on. So Robert, anything to add?
No, I think Kenny rightly pointed out around knowing the business. I think it's very important to understand input, process, output. It's a very simple model, right? What are the input, what are the process, and what's the output? And that reflects in your KPIs, that reflects in your ROTE, that reflects in your balance sheet and all of that, because fundamentally you are there to grow the business, and the value needs to be translated. So I think a lot of organizations today are talking about talent to value. You have talent, but what value the talent gets to the organization? So I think it's clear that when you demonstrate people processes talk to the business strategy, and that business strategy is documented into value. Because if there is no value that gets documented from a people strategy, it's just paper, right? And paper doesn't mean much unless it is a check, right? The right paper is important. So clearly, we just got to ensure that we create that. Again, Kenny, we are into digital payments, so SMS.
Which actually very nicely leads me to my next question, which is, about data. So when it comes to talent management and strategies, HR strategies, and even business strategies, how do CEOs and decision makers and HR leaders work together to leverage data and analytics? Kenny, want to take that question on?
Yeah, okay, I'll start first, and then Robert can take on. I think the data component of it has become very important, I think, the last 5-10 years. Not just HR, right? Across the board, everything is data, and we can model, and there are so many kind of tools that are available that was not present, I think, 10 years ago. So, and today we have a lot of data, not just from the company standpoint, but on people and the movement of people, and you have, all kinds of databases that you can to model and forecast the kind of people that you need in your talent supply chain that you want to bring in, and those kind of things. So I think the data thing will become more and more important, and is something that I think, again, that the newer generation of leaders or CEOs would understand more compared to the previous, because the previous generation, like I said, the people who are my age and older tend to base a lot more things on gut, which is wrong. And I think we, a lot are starting to learn how data works in terms of the people side of things. And that is, like I said, the 5-10 years has been very important. But I think maybe the only issue is that what we face today is that there is too much data the past 2 years, which is because we look at everything, right? We look at finance data, supply chain data, R&D, consumer NPS scores. We look at people. So there's so much data. The question is that then which are the ones that should we look at and all this? And I think, again, the past 6 to 12 months have been very good in terms of the AI thing coming in, which helps us to then more easily, look at what kind of data really is important, and it can process much faster. So I think the next 12, 18 months is going to be very exciting in terms of how HR can use, together with the CEO, can use AI to generate different models for recruitment, models for retention, models for reward, based on all this kind of data that we have collected the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're all in the database somewhere. So I think that one will be important, and the way that we train the AI on how it's supposed to assist in the way that we think. That is, to me, what I'm looking forward to for the next 12, 18 months.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. I think everyone is very, very curious to find out what the next few years have in store for us as well in that area. Robert, anything to add?
Look, I think, as Kenny has rightly said, right, we have a lot of data, and our employee portals or HRMS gives you a lot of data and insights, whether it is joining, retention, attrition, you name talent, you have 9box, you have potential identification, you have learning history, you have leadership, training, etc. At the end of the day, data tells you a lot of things, but data should also help you to ask those questions which you are not asking. And what are the blind spots that you are really not aware of that data should be able to expose to you. So I think generative AI is one example, which basically helps you integrate all this information space, and it helps you connect the dots, right? So a simple example in the current context, and I referred to it earlier, is also on talent management, right? So the earlier approach to talent management was, hey, identify who are my top potential. Okay, there are various tools in the market, right? You use an SHL tool, you can use a McKinsey tool, or you can use the standard 9box, who's high potential, who's low potential. Okay, great. But after having done that, what's the outcome? Where has that talent led you to in an organization which is evolving, in the industry which is changing, and in a technology space which is rather adapting as much as possible? So I think today what we see is we look at the organization strategy and we break that strategy into priorities. And then we believe in each priority, what is the level of talent that we have, and we need to deliver that particular priority. So you break an organization strategy into priorities. Priorities get identified based on people who have the biggest impact to that priority. Once you know that impact to that priority and people who have the biggest impact, you then start looking at the enablers. How do you enhance individual capability so that you move faster, you accelerate it from that? Why? It's a very clear correlation to the value that talent is going to have. So the question to ask is, do you have your highest valued people to the highest priority based in the organization? And if that answer is no, then there is something missing, because your highest value people are not driving your highest priority and the highest value to the organization. So that's how you look at talent. You look at value and you drive talent to value proposition.
Yes, and on that note, we've talked about, information databases, we've talked about generative AI. So I'm very curious to know both your opinions on this. So how do CEOs, talking about people now, how do CEOs and HR leaders actually work together to promote this culture of engaged employees for talent, not just talent management, but also talent retention? Robert, would you like to take this?
Yeah. So I'll go in. So look, I come from India, and cricket is very famous in India. So and the most successful captain in India is MS Dhoni. So MS Dhoni basically says, right, you should focus on building partnerships and not centuries, because if you start building partnership, you start winning games, and centuries will come. So individual goals and accomplishments will come. So when you look at the partnership between a CEO in the context of organization design or in the context of organization development or empowerment or people strategy, I think it's very important for the CEO and the management team to set the strategy. And very important is to articulate the strategy to purpose. Most of us spend good amount of our working life doing things in organizations. So I should start loving it. So what I love to do and how do I relate that part that I love to do to the organization that I'm working together? What is the correlation of that? So my purpose linking to organization purpose, and at some level, organizations contribute to society. Organization contributes to community. So my purpose, organization purpose, and the world needs it. I think you have a very great mission that you can create from for an individual employee, and that's how you drive engagement. When you start linking individual purpose, organization purpose to the wider needs of society as co-ed. Very great example that we all witnessed, right? COVID, that really happened for the last 2 years. The way technology adapted, the way organizations adapted, but with true humility, I think we never understood the impact of healthcare sector in our lives, and what do healthcare and meaning of mental well-being, etc. was. So I think today a lot of us really understand it, and that has become a compelling proposition for a lot of youngsters who join work. For them, it's pretty important in terms of what you do, how you do, but is it aligned to my mission? Is it aligned to my personal priorities? And how do you get that going? So I think clearly the partnership between a CEO, CHRO sets the talent landscape, builds your employee proposition, and that's how you take and scale the talent proposition. Just one simple example.
That's a great answer. Kenny, any thoughts on this? How to create a culture of empowered and engaged employees for talent retention?
Okay. Yeah, it's a really, for me, it's actually a tough question to answer. So I think what Robert mentioned across the board, those are critical in terms of the HR things that we want to build together. And I'm trying to think while that conversation is going on, I'm trying to think for myself. It's like, if you ask me what is the only one thing I would like to have improved, or one thing that I want to focus on, that I want to really be good at in partnering with my CHRO, I think if you throw away everything else, the only thing that I think comes to mind that is the most crucial thing is working together to build the right culture that we want. And the right culture, I'm trying to use the correct words here because it is not trying to be safe in the way that I use the words. So not every culture is liked by everyone, which means not every company is for everyone. So you need, I think the CEO and the CHRO need to determine what is the culture that we want and then build the culture together. To me, that is the single most important thing. If I strip out every other thing, the ability to work together to build the culture that we want, that is most crucial on top of all the, like I said, all the other technical stuff that we need to do. And that culture thing needs to be defined in a way that, and define a way and be built that is very purposeful. What I mean is that we need to know, because like, again, a lot of people say that, you know, we want everybody to be engaged, we want everybody to, but to me, it's not easy because every company or business has a different culture that they really want to. I give an example, right? So some CEOs or some businesses require a culture that is very high performing. I give an example. And the trade-off to that, you get a lot of people in the office who actually argue a lot, and a lot of people who individually go out there and sell and deliver, but it's not the right culture for people to have lunch together or dinner together, right? So that's a trade-off, because you can't have like all rainbows in a company, because you need, again, I think in order to fulfill certain business requirements, you really need to know what's the culture that you want. You cannot say I want to have a culture value, no, I have culture that has 50 different kind of values. That doesn't work. So you need to have, like, if I want a culture of people who are innovative, so that is a culture. We want people to always innovate, and culture that, you know, we want people to always come up with new things. Then that culture requires a trade-off on some other thing. That means you can't have like the perfect. Now, once you define the culture, that becomes, and once you build the right culture that you want, that becomes either a magnet or a push to certain people. So when you create that kind of culture, again, if you, like I mentioned, if you create a high pressure, high performing culture, you will attract those people who like those kind of fast paced, high performing people, but The people who like to innovate and think about new ideas and try things won't be able to survive, because the bosses there will say that, if I only try one time, you fail, I'll just take away your budget. So those kind of things may not sync with different companies. So that's why I need to be very careful as to what kind of culture we mean. And the word engagement means so if I like the culture, I'll be engaged. If I don't like the culture, I won't be engaged. So if I myself want to be likes the kind of things like empathy, and I want to have people who care, then I'll look for a company that has leaders and CEOs who care and have empathy. Then I'll be engaged, right? So that's that. But if I am the kind of person who likes that, but then the company that I join don't really care about people, they only care about numbers, and that's the culture that they want, no problem, because that's the culture that they define. But you will not engage me because I'm not the kind of person. So no matter what things you try to do, you try to give me a pinball machine, you try to give me free snacks throughout the day, I won't be engaged, because that's not the culture that I want. So I think that match needs to be determined. So I think, to me, above all, if I can unlock the piece about building the right culture that I really want together with my CHRO, above all things, that will be the key.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's very important to have clarity and alignment in the expectations, and definitely in setting up the culture. That's. So my next question would be, well, what are some active steps then that CEOs can take to create and nurture that synergy with HR, with the HR leaders? Because, as you said, you talked about creating that culture and being very clear in what you're actually looking for in that culture. So what active steps do you think that CEOs can take to make sure that everyone's on the same page, that HR leaders are on the same page, just to be aligned as well?
Well, for one thing, I think it's like any relationship, right? One of the key things is for the CEOs to spend more time with the CHRO, which sometimes doesn't really happen that much. So to me, simple things like have more lunch and dinners and tea breaks with your CHRO, and that to me works and solves 80-90% of the problem. Because I think the other side of it is that a lot of time we just fire away WhatsApp messages and email. Things go wrong all the time. So and that becomes very cold. And I think not enough of those things can be addressed the right way. So I think that the ability to spend time formally and informally to understand each other, that will be the key to bridging the two sides. And I think from a pure CEO point of view, what I would hope the CHRO would do more is to be my guide as to what I am doing right or doing wrong as a CEO. Not enough of that is being, I think most of the time people stay away from the CEO for whatever reasons, but I wish there was a lot more, because a lot of CEOs, I don't generalize, but a lot of CEOs, including myself, are sometimes just either blind or deaf or not sensitive to what is happening on the ground. That happens because of different business priorities, right? Or it's just the way that we are built. So the ability for the CHRO to come and help the CEO to understand what the people are feeling, what are the people thinking about, what are the sentiments on the ground, and those are kind of whispers that people have. I think those needs to be fed to the CEO on a more regular basis. What I personally hope will be fed to me on a more regular basis, so that I know how to do certain things. Otherwise, if I don't hear those things, I'm going to make a lot of different kind of assumptions. And because most CEOs, when they go around and they ask their staff, "Oh, how are you?" the staff will say, "Yeah, I'm great." But at the back of their mind, they say, "I hate you, I hate the company." So I think that's yeah. So those are things that happen. So some people say, do more town halls, and okay, but the way that Asians, I don't know about other countries, but the way that Asians do is that when you ask Asians, for me, the experience is that if you go in a town hall and the CEO say, "How are you all doing?" everybody will say, "Great." Nobody will say no. And then to the CEO who is holding a town hall, everything looks and sounds good, because everybody it's like a performance for the CEO. And I found most town halls to be quite useless as far as those kind of dynamics are concerned. So, and yeah, so we just need to be able to fix some of those things. So that's where I'm coming from.
That sounds good. How about you, Robert? Do more lunches and dinners with the CEO sound good to you too?
I like the candor in which Kenny is expressing the day-to-day realities, right? That he himself goes through. So I think the essence of his conversation is active dialogue, right? So uh, whether it is the voice of employees, whether it is the voice of clients, whether it is the voice from the shop floor, I think it's about the active dialogue that one needs to have between a CHRO and CFO, and that dialogue needs to continue. The medium could be anything, but the importance is the dialogue. Um, the second thing that we always look for in any dialogue is consistency, because as a management team, how consistent are you? When you talk about a performance culture, and suddenly somebody is just getting paid for no reason, and there is no differentiation that is available, I think clearly that takes away the consistency in the organization. So a CEO, CHRO, or the management team having consistency in messaging, right, is pretty important, and that's where the dialogue comes into the picture, because as a management team, you need to stand together, and that's a unified face, because then on the down the line, you have a consistency of message, you have a consistency of leadership. uh, the other important thing is, how do people see you as a leader, and see the management team as a leader? Because what you see, people will also imbibe and learn as you go forward. So when you talk in town halls, people know that it's a show that is created because five people will come up and say, hey, great words about the organization. But have you created a space where people can ask those questions which are tough, and management or people leaders or the management team will respond with authenticity? So clearly, the authenticity of the communication is what drives people to believe. Look, NASA talked about taking the man on the moon, right? And the ground level person who was managing the security also believed that NASA could land the person on the moon, and that's how the belief started to sink in. So clearly, I think as a management team, and whether it's a CHRO, CFO, CEO, COOs, all the team put together, it's about authenticity of leadership, and consistency of message. So clearly, the dialogue is pretty important. How you come across with that message is pretty important, and how does people get judged? So like Kenny talked about a performance organization, which basically looks for results. So in that entire culture, people are afraid to make mistakes. Nobody will take a risk. Nobody will innovate. So there are flip sides of the coin to say, okay, if I fail, I'm gone. The next day, I'm out of the door. You'll just give me a small box and say, thank you so much, right? So, so it is important to breed that right culture, and by doing that right messaging right from the top. So clearly, it has its pluses and minuses on both sides. And modern organizations do one thing: they adapt. Modern organizations do clearly move on as times change. So either you evolve as leaders, and people accept that everybody doesn't know the right answers, so everybody learns. Nobody sitting at the management team comes up with more wisdom than anybody else in the entire organization. So I think it's very important that you encourage innovation, you encourage creativity in the organization, so that people bring their best self at work. And if I get my best self at work, I will treat the organization as my own, and not like 9 to 8 job or 9 to 5 job and then go back home. So I think a lot of sentiments Kenny is resonating are real life sentiments, and we as employees and leaders go through the same, because at the end of the day, whether CHR or a CEO, he or she is also an employee of the organization. So I think it reciprocates on both sides of the fence.
Yes, I was just about to say, to note that Robert and Kenny seem to be on the same page for a lot of things, and you both indeed actually have a lot of chemistry together. So my next question would actually be to ask, are there any successful examples, success stories that you can think of, where such a power partnership actually worked very, very nicely?
let me take a start, and then I'm sure Kenny will add a lot of prime slot examples to that as well.
I'm
So
sure,
I think
yes.
I'll give you an example of the organization that I work for, right? Standard Chartered Bank. So I think we've talked about an ambitious strategy. We've talked about an ambitious growth plan. We've had the biggest quarter, and the last year was a very great year for the bank as a whole. I think one of our defining steps from a strategy perspective is to have the right culture, and we've talked about the performance culture. Now, when you break down performance culture, like Kenny broke down the strategy and what he's really looking for, when you break down performance culture, I think one of the important things that we talked about is a culture of feedback. How open are you in terms of giving, receiving feedback, and how safe you feel in terms of giving feedback to your superior, your CEOs, your MDs, so on and so forth. And and this example basically is, it comes right from the top. So when a CEO is saying, hey, I'm looking for feedback, I will go to and take 360-degree feedback right from a management team to 2 levels below, so 3 levels below, and anybody who has feedback, please feel free to share. And you start measuring that. You start measuring how are people evolving in giving feedback. It is a culture. Many people like to give good news. Many people talk great. Hey, when you ask for feedback, 9 out of 10 people will tell you how good you are and how great you are, and you've been so instrumental in my career, in my life, the best person ever I worked for, and so on and so forth. Now, whether it is authentic or not, but that's great. But if that individual is not telling you what you can do well, what you can do better, uh, I think that feedback doesn't mean much, because it doesn't come from a place of growth. It doesn't come from a place of you know collaboration. So when you collaboration doesn't mean that I join hands and work together. I say yes to everything. Collaboration means I say no, I challenge, I together we work faster, and together we work closer, but we will attain the objectives. Whether how we get there, I think it's a very different question. So I think that's a very good example where CEOs in Standard Chartered have said, hey, I'm open to feedback. I want my management team to be open to feedback. This is so in any conversations you will see where people will talk about saying, hey, we are launching this new tool on feedback. Let's embrace it. I want 100% of my team to do that, and sharing that feedback openly. So as a CEO, the CEO has shared his feedback openly to say, this is the feedback I have received. I'm really thankful to person XXX who's given this feedback, and absolutely, please continue to do so. So I think that inculcates the culture, and that purely drives people to perform better. So I think we broke down a lot of these down to pretty simple things that are measurable, metric driven, but highly impactful.
Thanks for sharing, Robert. And Kenny, anything to add? Anything to share?
I'm trying to think of, I think you asked for an example of some of this, if it works
Success
well.
story.
Yeah, success stories. Personally, not many. I've not seen that many, but I have across the years, I think, anyone here from AirAsia? I want to know so that if I say the wrong thing, I won't be shot. So
I just bought a ticket from them, if that counts.
Okay, good. So if you know Tony, I've had many discussions with Tony Menezes, the founder, over the years, right? And since the beginning of when he found AirAsia, one of the things is that if you notice, AirAsia has a particular culture when you go there. And when he first started, I mean, the culture has changed over the years, but when he first started, and I mentioned it many times before, the culture that he built was very simple, and the culture that he didn't mention about empowerment, or he didn't talk about like talent or development. He didn't talk about those big words, right? He only mentioned to his team when he first started AirAsia for the first 5 to 10 years was that we are on the culture of being cheap, because we are on the cheapest airline in the world and we want to have the cheapest tickets in the world. So the people that he hired and the people that he retained, the people that he rewarded together with HR and molded the culture were people who knew how to save money. If you did not know how to save money, you were out of AirAsia very quickly within the first couple of years when you were there. And I don't care how good you are, I don't care what kind of things you do. If you don't know how to help the company to save money and lower the ticket price over time, you can't survive there. So that was the first couple of years, and that's how he molded AirAsia in the beginning stage when they first, were trying to. And I knew that because he made a remark to me. He said, Kenny, I will never hire anybody from Malaysia Airlines. I will never hire anybody from Singapore Airlines. And you will notice that his first batch didn't consist of people from those kind of airlines. So because he says people from Malaysia Airlines and Singapore Airlines only know how to spend money. They don't know how to save money. So he didn't hire the really good people from there. He just hired from other places where people really know how to save money. And that was why all the cheap innovations came. And that is why you have a plane with no food and lousy seats in the beginning.
He knew what he wanted.
Yeah, he knew what he wanted. And that's the culture. And when I remember him talking to he didn't have a CHRO at that time. He just had like a people manager. But that was the culture that they knew what they wanted to be. So it's successful when they try. But today, it's a different kind of culture. It has grown. And his culture is around more of him as a personality, Tony. I think if you look at AirAsia today, equates to him as a personality, right? Which is very candid, humorous, open, but very tough. So he said, if you walk into Red Queue today, the culture that he spoke with, and you can hear this through any of the conferences that the chief people officer of AirAsia will tell you, it's a culture of a duality. It's a very fun culture. People are open. They can approach Tony anytime. Tony doesn't have a room. He sits, those of you who have been to Red Queue, he sits in a third floor, open space, and he's just there, right? And everybody, I can see when I'm talking with him, every other person comes and talk to him. So there is no protocol, no ticket number, nothing. Though he's just like, and he's shouting across the room. When he sees somebody cross by, have you done that? I mean, he's literally shouting across the room while I'm there. So it's that kind of culture which he has built, and everybody follows that culture, which is good, like I say, but everybody likes that about him. They're open, they can tell him what is wrong, what is right, and that's the point. But then there's also the flip side to the culture that's built, which is very tough. You come in, I pay you well, I like our culture, but he sets very high targets and he tells you only have 6 months to turn around this. If not, you don't deserve to be here. So it's not easy to survive in that kind of culture as well. And you need to like it, and you need to, be able to
know what you signed up for.
Yeah. So in terms of having that vision of the kind of partnership that he had with the chief people officer, I think in terms of, you want to look at how it has grown into what they wanted it to be, that would be the most, and if you ask any staff right now, the ground crew, the air crew, they love, those who have been there for many years, they love AirAsia and they love their culture. They can't survive anywhere outside AirAsia.
Wow.
It's a different culture, right? So, so the question is, AirAsia, have fun, but kill yourself. Yes. If you don't kill yourself, he will kill you. So it's either way, right? So, but that is so if you talk to anybody from AirAsia that comes out that has been there enough years, they will tell you that is the exact culture that they have today.
Nice. And we've also heard the words active dialogue, which is actually what has been happening in the chat box throughout this whole conversation, which means that this conversation has been very inspiring. So we will now open the floor for some audience Q&A. And actually, there already have been, as I said, a very active chat box, and some questions are already typed in. So the first question right at the top of the chat box is, sometimes we find that a good HR CEO partnership dissuades other employees from engaging with the CHRO completely and in a transparent manner. Have you seen that? And if yes, what can one do to bring in that confidence? Maybe Robert, would you like to take that? That sounds like an HR related question.
All questions are CEO questions. HR just tries to respond and help the CEO. so I think it's true. I think it's true, right? So it's because one part of the HR function is to be an employee advocate, and most of the time people come to the HR function for its independence and voice of reason. However, if people in HR are seen to be just echoing or just saying yes to what the CEO is saying, then I think you lose that advocacy role that HR is playing, and that's where the confidence of colleagues to come and tell you issues and concerns. Because look, this is also an important part of the organization, right? Where people feel safe to raise concerns and questions and raise risk, because something which is hidden, fraud, etc. These are mechanisms through which you can get them up, get them highlighted. So I think a good example of a good way of doing all of this is to just create more mechanisms of feedback. Now, whether it is through your surveys, whether it is through anonymous surveys that go out, or whether it is through skip level meetings, whether it is through management level discussions, I think uh, one needs to convey the message of employee advocacy. One needs to convey the message of confidence, and one needs to convey the message of trust. So if you were to get that messages across, I think it works well. But I think it's more got to do with how you come across in those kind of conversations, and really the messaging from a personal perspective, because at some point in time it's also your personal brand that also counts. So more important, it's not that you need to be in conflict at all point in time. It's just that you need to be seen to be less biased. You need to be seen to be fair. You need to be seen to be equitable in the decisions you make, and there are demonstrable processes in the organization to hold people accountable, which are beyond bias. So I think that's where that question may have come from. And sometimes people just see CEOs CHROs echoing the most powerful person in the organization, which is a CEO, right? So people don't like to challenge authority. So it is also a way to look at that. But that's my perspective. I'm sure Kenny and a couple of other colleagues may have a different view as well.
Thanks for that, Robert. Kenny, would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And I agree to the question, which is, if the partnership is very strong, it does dissuade people from being transparent with either the CEO or CHRO. It does. And it depends on how the dynamic plays out. But again, on top of that, I'd like to say that one of the things to go around or to lessen the issue is for the CHRO and CEO to prove to the people why this dynamic is good. And that comes to the point of the CHRO must be able to pass the message that, look, I get the ear of the CEO, and therefore whatever you want, you can truthfully tell me so that I can tell the CEO and get things done. Because if they find the CHRO ineffective in terms of the partnership with the CEO, why do they want to communicate to the CHRO in the first place? So, but if they know that there are certain things that, so this is where the CHRO and the CEO needs to be smart in saying that, okay, this is what we are receiving. We must then prove to the people that why this partnership is good. So it can be even simple things, right? Like if you have a cafe example, for example, if you have a cafe in your company, whether it's a plant or whatever, and there are a lot of feedback coming, even simple things like a lot of people are saying, oh, we should have more healthy and vegetarian food. I'm just giving a very simple example. And that feedback comes to CHRO, and the CHRO tells the CEO, and the CEO says, yes, let's immediately make a change. So people can see that credibility is being built, that whatever I mentioned, the CHRO is being, that at least then they know, okay, that the CHRO has the ear of the CEO and things can be done. So that's a very simple example that I want to give. But again, many things can be. So yeah, so I think that is important, to be able to prove to the people why the partnership is good, rather than try to break it up. All right. So, but again, if the dynamic is not handled well, it's very rightfully mentioned that it will dissuade people, because it becomes a too powerful club for people to try to talk to them. Right? So that's my view.
Yeah, I like that, because it really talks about what we were talking about as well, just being consistent and putting down the actions as well. So now we have a question. We have someone raising their hand. Please go ahead and speak.
Okay.
Hi,
so, hi. Thanks to Change It All, as well as Rob and Kenny, for this truly insightful session. As you rightly observed, Adeline, the more reactions you get and the more controversy you get in the comment section, the more impactful the session has been. So this is really good.
Yes.
One question from both of your experiences, if the speakers may please answer. So having great alignment between the CHRO and the CEO clearly is important, and we've addressed this issue. But a follow through is that we also then need to build similar characteristics in the rest of the HR organization. And many organizations now are kind of moving, growing, evolving from being traditional procedural HR setups to more progressive HR organizations, where partly the challenge the CHRO who comes in faces is that they need to refresh the existing talent, but also partly that they need to develop the talent to a more business partnership kind of a mindset and skill set. In your experience, what are some of the ways that a CHRO could go about this journey, and how would you prioritize maybe in the first year, the first 2 or 3 things that the individual should focus?
Thanks, Kostov, and thanks for being here. I hope you're enjoying this conversation. Again, I'll share my perspectives, and I'm sure there are others as well who can add further. So I think it's about setting expectations, and not having high expectations is not the start point. So I think setting high expectations and allowing yourself to rise above and be in that frame that you are comparing yourself not towards your benchmark organization, but also towards the future in how your organization is going to move, and also how the industry is going to move. So I think it starts from that alignment in terms of what is your long-term sustainability from an industry perspective, and how aligned an HR model you require as you go forward. So clearly, the more digital you evolve, you're looking at HR to be more advisory. You're looking at HR to be more fundamental in terms of grooming and developing talent. So it's a combination of the evolution model that you partly play and you partly grow in all of that. Having said that, I think the first thing from my vantage point when I look at it is I look at first, what are the skill sets that you have within your team, and what are the skill sets that you look for as you go forward in the future. Some of it you could upskill, okay, but at some point in time you also need to bring fresh thinking in your team just to create that positive tension. Because if there is no positive tension, if there is no competition, I think we don't challenge, we don't do enough, and that's how you start evolving, which is similar to an organization as well, but it's also similar to HR as well. So that's one. Second is to create a room for experimentation, because there are some amount of things that we haven't thought about, but let's look at some room for experimentation within our team. So it could be future of work, it could be future skills, it could be looking at sunrise and sunset skill sets, because not all skill sets are going to be the same. So there will be sunrise skill sets which you need to evolve and which you need to grow. But adopting a data-driven digital approach is something that is key as you go forward in the future. So hence you scale your organization in the first 1 to 2 organizations, because the earlier you do it, the better it is from a long-term perspective. And I wouldn't wait for 1 to 2 years. I would ideally do that in the first 6 to 8 months, and then move forward from there. But that's the way I'm processing it in my mind. Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry.
Please go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, it's your question. Go ahead. I just wanted to come in and say, one of the things I think that we've kind of danced around this issue, but the reason this is an issue is because HR has failed to stand up to CEOs. And that is why that whole function has been relegated to a procedural department. So this is not just, I mean, these are tectonic plates shifting. You've got quiet quitting. Now you've got loud quitting, where toxic managers are being named on LinkedIn. You talked about psychological safety. You talked about all of these important things, the ability to give feedback. How are you going to do that? The change of culture. So I think you all shared a lot of sort of what you'd love to see happen. But the question I thought was, How? And my take is it's not going to happen until HR takes on the CEO. In organizations where you've got strong HR leadership, the culture has changed because the HR does say, stop, you can't do that, to the CEO, whether it's through having cups of coffee or whether it's, being assertive. And I think that's when you'll begin to see change. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
I can quickly respond to that.
Very well
Mr.
said.
Mathur.
Very
I
good
believe,
2 cents.
If I may quickly respond to that, Mr. Mathur, I believe not every CHRO has the personality needed to be able to bully the CEO.
So we will depend. We will. That'll evolve.
But I can tell you that if I'm one of those, and my life is very pleasant indeed. So I totally align.
Historically, just a parallel. Okay, historically, IT was embedded under finance. Okay, it's not until IT thumped the table that IT today sits at the board level, and you have CEOs that come from the IT side. I believe HR has a similar journey.
That's true. We're always evolving. Thank you for that. Thank you for those opinions. This is a very, very exciting conversation, and it seems like maybe we need to have a part 2 down the line. We probably will need a second session for all this, but it is now 5 o'clock, so it is time for us to say goodbye. But you know what? Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and not only joining us, but also participating in the dialogue. Really appreciate you not only taking time, but also investing your questions and your comments. Please give another round of applause to our guests, Kenny and Robert. Thank you so much for your time, for such an insightful conversation. And for those who would like to revisit our conversation, please visit our Change at All pages on Facebook and LinkedIn. Do like and follow us to get more updates. Yes, it was a very wonderful session. Thank you, Madan, as well.